Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. My name is Michelle Cabral, and I'm the Senior Marketing Manager at 3Shape and your host for this evening. On behalf of 3Shape and 3DBioCAD, I would like to welcome you and personally thank you for joining us on our webinar as we discuss guided surgery and the digital workflow. Our webinar will start with a presentation from Dr. Michael Park, followed by a live demonstration of Implant Studio from Jack from 3DBioCAD. And lastly, we'll review our promotions with John from 3DBioCAD. Due to the large audience, your mics have been muted. So we ask that you use the Q&A function or the chat function below to ask any of your questions. At the end of the webinar, we'll have a panel discussion where you can upload your questions and we'll ask them live. So just make sure you do that. Without further ado, and while you're all here this evening, I would like to introduce Dr. Michael Park, who is a board-certified prosthodontist and periodontist in Canada. Dr. Park received his Doctor of Implant, Dr. Michael Park received his Doctor of Dental Surgery degree from the University of Alberta and joined his periodontics from the Boston University. And he holds his private practice today as a periodontist and a prosthodontist. So I would like to welcome Dr. Michael Park.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mike Park. I would like to welcome you to today's webinar. The webinar's topic today is guided implant surgery, and we'll go over the digital workflow of guided implant surgery. So before we begin, I'd like to thank Michelle, Alyssa from 3Shape, and Jack and John from 3DBioCAD for organizing this webinar. So now let's begin. All right. So this is the outline of the presentation. So we'll have a brief introduction of guided surgery, and then we'll go over the two-supported guide workflow, and then we'll go over the mucosa-supported guide workflow, and we'll show some cases at the end. Okay, so let's go over the introduction first. So as you all know, we've been doing implant surgery and implant placement for a very long time, and we have been using a freehand technique where it's not computer guided. And as you can see in these images, we have been pretty successful at placing these implants, and we are able to place the implants in more or less an ideal position, even without doing it guided. So now we need to ask, what's the benefit of doing guided surgery? Because if we have been successful doing freehand surgery for so long, why do we have to do guided at this point? So one of the benefit of doing guided surgery is reduced surgical time, because we don't have to worry about the angulation and all that stuff, because that's all pre-planned during the planning phase. So the surgical time can be much reduced. And if you want to do a flapless implant surgery now with guided surgery, that's possible as long as we do have adequate keratinized tissue and adequate bone volume. But I think ultimately, the reason why we do decide to go with guided surgery is because of the accuracy and the improved precision and predictability of placement. And ultimately, this reduces the risks. So if we look at this randomized control study, they compared freehand implant surgery to fully guided implant surgery. And what they found was the apical implant deviation of freehand implant surgery was 2 millimeters, and fully guided implant surgery was 1 millimeter. So the freehand surgery was there was twice as much deviation with freehand surgery. So we can see that the fully guided is much more accurate. However, one thing that we need to keep in mind is that although fully guided implant surgery is accurate, but it's not perfect, because as you can see, the apical deviation is not 0 millimeter. There's still a 1 millimeter deviation in this study. So when we are doing guided surgery, we always need to keep that in mind, that even with guided, there can be a little bit of error, but of course, it's much better than free-handed surgery. So now let's go over the two supported guide workflow. So the first step is data acquisition. So we need to do our CBCT scan and the surface scanning. And then we ultimately superimpose these two images together. And then we do our digital wax up. So that's our prosthetic planning. And then based on the prosthetic planning and the anatomy and vital structures that we see from the CT scan, we can position our implant in the correct position. And once the implant's in the correct position, then we can design our guide and fabricate the surgical guide. And then once the guide's ready, we can do our surgery. But let's go into each step a little bit more in detail. So the first thing that we are going to do is a CBCT scan. So there are some instructions that we need to follow when we are taking a CBCT. We want to make sure that the patient bite is not completely closed, because when the patient's biting down all the way, we're not able to see the occlusal anatomy of the teeth. So when we are superimposing in the later stages, superimposing the surface scan with a CT scan, it will be much more difficult. So we want the bite to be slightly open, and we do this by using cotton rolls. And if the patient does have any removable metal parts, like partial denture or something, we want to make sure that we remove that before we take the CT scan, because the metal in the partial denture will cause scatter, and we're not going to get a very clear image. And when we are doing guided surgery, or when we're taking CT scan for a guided surgery, we want at least 3/4 of the jaw scanned. And the reason why we do want at least 3/4 is because when we are superimposing the CT scan to the intraoral scan or the surface scan, if we have at least 3/4, it'll be much more accurate than having a small section of the CT scan. And if you do want to show the gingiva, if you do want to see the gingiva on the CT scan, what you can do is you can put cotton rolls in the vestibules and underneath the tongue to kind of separate the lip and cheek away from the gingiva. And this can be helpful when we are confirming that the two images, the surface scan and the CT scan, is well positioned or not. So I don't completely rely on this. However, it is another tool that we can use to see if the superimposition is quite accurate. So the next step is to do the surface scanning. So there's two ways of doing the surface scanning. The way I like to use the way that I like to do it in my office is to use an intraoral scanner. We use a trio scanner, and with the Implant Studio, it works very seamlessly. However, if you do not have an intraoral scanner in your office, what you can do is you can take an impression using either PVS or polyether preferably, and then you can send that to your lab, and then the lab can pour the model and use a desktop scanner to digitize that model. And once the data acquisition is completed, we can superimpose these images together. And the Implant Studio will do this automatically for you, like you see in this image. However, if there are a lot of restorations inside the mouse, then the software will have a hard time accurately superimposing these images together. So in those cases, what you would need to do is you need to look for teeth that do not have any restorations on them, and then use those as common reference points to superimpose these images together. However, let's say all the teeth have been restored with, let's say, zirconia, and there's a lot of scatter because of that. One technique that you can use is you can use like a retractor, like an Optragate, to separate the cheek and the lips out of the way and get that out of the way. And then you can use flowable and put that on the gingiva. So I'll make like 6 to 8 dots, put 6 to 8 dots on the buccal surface of the gingiva, far away as possible from the restorations. And then what we would do is we would take this intraoral scan and take the CT scan. Now this way, it's far away from the scatter, these flowable composites, and then we can ultimately use these flowable composite to superimpose these images together. And the reason why I place 6 or 8 is sometimes during the data acquisition process, when we're taking the CT scan or when we're doing the intraoral scan, the flowable composite can move. So if it does move, then at least we have other ones to use to superimpose these images together. Okay, so after these two images have been superimposed, the next step is to do the digital wax up. So the 3Shape Implant Studio is very, very user-friendly. So if you look, we can position the tooth and do the wax up. And if you look at the screen right now, we can actually copy the number 9. So we can tell the software to copy the number 9, and basically it's a mirror image of number 9. And then all we now do is just rotate it and position it into place. Now, for example, in this case, once after we copied it and then positioned it into the right place, what you'll notice is the CEJ of the wax up is actually more coronal compared to where the current free gingival margin is. And later, I'll show you what we will do in cases like this during when I go over the case. Okay, now that the prosthetic design is done, now, based on the prosthetic design, we're able to do our implant planning and position the implant in the correct position so that the implant will be restorable. And then, of course, we use the bone information, the hard tissue information, and the vital structure information from the CT scan to, of course, position the implant as well. And after the implant gets placed in the correct position, now we're ready to do the surgical guide design. And again, in Implant Studio, this process is very, very easy. The first thing that you do is you draw the outline of the surgical guide. And then the software will create that surgical guide for you. And then if there are areas that you think are too thin, if you think a certain area needs support, then you can add support bars like this. And here we're adding a support bar on the palate. However, the reason why I used to do this is because I didn't want any distortion happening, but I realized that it's not absolutely necessary anymore. So now I don't put palatal support bars. But of course, the red boxes, those are the viewing windows, and we need viewing windows because we want to make sure that the guide is seated properly, because if the guide is not seated properly all the way down, then of course the implant will ultimately not get placed in the correct position. And then of course you can put your patient's name on the surgical guide so that you don't get that mixed up. So as you can see, like the Implant Studio is very, very user friendly, and it doesn't take too long to design a surgical guide once the implant is positioned virtually. And then with the 3Shape software, you can actually export the surgical guide design in a STL format. And because it's a STL format, you can use any type of 3D printer you want to print the surgical guide. The printer that we use in our office is made by Formlabs. We like the printer. It's not as expensive as other 3D printers, but the accuracy and fit of it is actually quite good. And another benefit that you have is that the resin can be autoclaved, which I really like. So now that the guide is all fabricated, now we're ready to do the implant surgery. So let me just share a case with you. So this patient came in with a broken number 8. And if you look at the picture on the right side, the surgical guide is seated, and you confirm that the surgical guide is fully seated by looking at the viewing windows. And once you notice that the guide is seated all the way, now we can do your osteotomy. And in this case, we're doing an immediate implant placement. And if you look at the second picture from the left, you can see that the osteotomy is made on the palatal slope of the socket. And if you have done freehand immediate implant placement, you'll know that it's not easy to do this osteotomy just because it is on a slope. Your drill will want to slip, but of course, with guided surgery, that's not a problem because the surgical guide is guiding our drill. So we're not worried about slippings. And we're placing our implants through the guide, so it's a fully guided surgery. So if you do the implant surgery this way, the implant gets placed in the correct position, and it's very stress-free because a lot of times when we are doing freehand immediate implant placement, there's always a little bit of anxiety, right? Because we're never sure if it's going to get placed in the correct position, but of course with guided surgery, we don't have that problem. Okay, in this case, we decided to do an immediate temporary crown, but unfortunately, in this case, the insertion torque was below 35 Newton centimeters, so we did not want to provisionalize right away, so we ended up doing a custom healing abutment. So now if you look at this temporary crown design, you know how when we were doing the digital wax up, the CEJ of that wax up was more chronal compared to the actual free gingival margin. That's what we see with a temporary crown. This temporary crown was milled using our milling machine in-house. And then based on this temporary crown, what we decided to do is we fabricated a healing abutment. So if you look at the healing abutment on the distal buccal corner, you can notice that there's actually a small gap in that area. And this gap is left there intentionally. And if you look at the 1 week post-op, the gum tissue has actually moved up coronally because we left that space. So now the two centrals, the free gingival margin of the two centrals will be symmetrical. So that's the basic workflow for the two supported guide. Next, we'll go over the Mucosa-supported guide. So unlike a two supported guide where we have teeth as common points to superimpose the CT scan and the surface scan, the Mucosa-supported guide, we don't actually have common points. So if we look at the CT scan of a edentulous patient, we don't have any soft tissue information in there. And if we look at the intraoral scan of the edentulous patient, there's no hard tissue information. So we're not able to superimpose these images or scans together. So we need another technique of doing the implant planning. So this is a workflow for Mucosa-supported guide. So unlike the two supported guide where we take a surface scan and one CT scan, here we're actually taking two CT scans, and we'll go over what those scans are. So the first CT scan we take is a CT scan of the patient with the scan appliance inside the mouth with fiducial markers. Fiducial markers are basically radiographic markers. And of course, the scan appliance is seated using a bite registration material. And the second CT scan that we take is of the scan appliance itself with fiducial markers on it. And when we do these CT scans, there are some requirements that we need to follow. So the denture fit needs to be adequate. If the denture fit is not adequate, then you would want to reline the denture. Or what you can do is you can use a PVS impression material to reline the denture temporarily just for the CT scan. And after you take the CT scan, you can, of course, remove the PVS. Another requirement is that the denture needs to be metal free. So as we all know, if there is metal in the denture and if you use that to take a CT scan, there's going to be a lot of scatter. So in cases where there is metal on the complete denture, what we can do is we can duplicate that denture using PMMA and then use that duplicate to take the CT scan. And on the denture, because if we just put the denture and take a CT scan, we're not going to see the denture inside the mouth. What we need to do is we need to apply these fiducial markers. Basically what they are they're round opaque markers that has a sticker on it. So you basically stick it onto the denture. So you want to make sure that the denture or your scan appliance is very dry when you're applying it. And of course, you don't want to put it on the biting surface of the teeth because patient will not be able to bite down properly. And of course, you don't want it on the denture border or on the intaglio surface because the denture will not seat all the way. So these are videos just showing you how we place the fiducial markers on. The one that I like to use is it's a 1 millimeter ball made by Shermark. I prefer the 1 millimeter ball over the 2 millimeter just because it's smaller, so it feels like it's more accurate, but also the size of the sticker is much smaller, so I don't have to actually trim the sticker to place it. I find that the 2 millimeter ball sticker is actually quite large, and a lot of times I have to cut it using scissors, so it's extra work, so I prefer the 1 millimeter ball from Shermark. And when you take a CT scan, what you're going to see is you're going to see these dots, these balls on the CT scan. So you're not going to see the denture itself or the scan appliance itself, but you will see the fiducial markers that you have put on the scan appliance. And the next step is to do a bite registration. The bite registration, that material that I like to use is silicone bite registration material for this. I don't like to use wax because ultimately we are going to use this bite registration that we did on the CT scan appointment during surgery. So we're going to use the bite registration to seat the surgical guide. And if you, of course, do it in wax, wax can distort depending on the temperature. So that's why I prefer using a silicone bite registration material for this. And of course, when you're taking the bite, you don't want to see any show-throughs on the bite registration material, because if there is show-through, that means the dentures or the scan appliance touching the opposing. And if it does, now the scan appliance will move, and now you're not getting an accurate record. So let me just go over why we do a bite registration. So of course, if your scan appliance or your denture has perfect occlusion, and when the patient is in CR, when you put the patient in CR position, and if you get them to bite down, if it coincides with MIP, that's perfect. You actually don't need a bite registration. You can just get them to bite down together and take the CT scan. However, if their bite is either not stable, or when you put them into centric relation position, which is a repeatable position, if it doesn't coincide with MIP, what can happen is your denture can move. So of course, if the denture moves, then it's not in an accurate position, so that's not good. So what do? We take a bite registration material while keeping the scan appliance perfectly seated. Okay, so like I discussed before, we do use silicone bite registration material and then get the patient into centric relation position. And the reason why we use CR position is it's not because it's like the best occlusion or anything. It's just a repeatable position. So I do want it to be a repeatable position. So that's why we use CR. And of course, you can make sure that the patient's in CR by getting the patient to just, after the material has set, you can get them to open and close and open and close and make sure that it's the record is correct. And then of course, rather than checking to see if your denture occlusion is perfect, which can take a long time, it's just easier to just take a bite registration material and not have to check the denture occlusion. So for any case, all the cases that we do take a bite registration, and we don't necessarily check the denture occlusion. So yeah, if you look at the picture on the right, you'll see a scan appliance with fiducial markers on it and bite registration to seat the surgical guide basically in the correct position. So after the first scan is taken, we want to make sure that there's no airspace underneath the scan appliance. So if you look at the CT scan on the right-hand side, you'll notice that there's no airspace underneath. But if you look at the CT scan on the left, there's a lot of air spaces. So if there are lots of air spaces like on the left side, that's not a good scan. So you would want to redo the scan. And the reason why we do get air spaces underneath the scan appliance is because either the scan appliance is not fitting properly and needs a reline, or the bite registration is not very accurate. So patient is not biting in the correct position. So now the denture is moving. So you want to correct these first and then take another scan if you do get air spaces underneath. And if you look at this scan, like you don't see the scan appliance. You only see, in a CT scan, you only see the fiducial markers. And the reason why you don't see the outline of the scan appliance is because the radial density of the soft tissue and the material that the scan appliance is made out of is very similar. So you can actually isolate it and visualize the scan appliance on the CT scan. So that's why we take scan number 2. And scan number 2, basically what we're doing is we're taking the scan appliance out. There already has fiducial markers on it, and we put it on a platform, and then we take a CT scan of the scan appliance itself. And of course, if you put it in Ziploc bag that takes care of like cross-contamination, that kind of stuff. So that's good. And the reason why we are able to isolate and visualize the scan appliance, if we take it in the scan 2, is because the radial density of PMMA, which the scan appliance is made out of, and air is very different. So we're able to isolate and visualize the scan appliance. And this scan appliance has lots of information for us, right? So with this scan number 2, we're able to see the digital wax up, right? That's the prosthetic information because we see the teeth. And we can use this to position our implant in the correct position. And also, we can fabricate a digital cast by creating a negative of the intaglio surface of the scan appliance. So the digital cast that we created from the negative of the scan appliance can be used to fabricate the surgical guide, ultimately the surgical guide, and then surgical guide can sit on that digital cast, and of course that will fit inside the patient's mouth as well. Okay, now that the data acquisition is done, now the next step is to superimpose these images together. So the common points now that we have, the common reference points, are the fiducial markers. So we see the fiducial markers on scan 1, and of course we see the fiducial markers on scan 2, and then we can use these as common points and then just basically superimpose these images together. The 3Shape software will automatically do this for you, but of course if you do want to adjust it, you can manually adjust it as well. And now we have all the information that we need to do our implant planning. So we have the CT scan. On the CT scan, we have the bone information, the vital structures, sinus, inferior alveolar nerve. Now in the middle, if you look at the middle images, now we have the surface scan. The surface scan, we got it by creating a negative of that intaglio surface of scan number 2. And then we have the prosthetic information, the diagnostic wax up, because now we can see the teeth. So now we have all the information that we need in order for us to do the implant planning and and design the surgical guide. So next step is to do the implant planning. So now because we have the prosthetic information and we have the bone information, the hard tissue information, now we can plan our implants accordingly and place them in the correct position. And one good thing about the Implant Studio is that you can actually place virtual abutments on the virtually planned implants, and then you can change the angulation. So if you look at the picture on the top left, you'll notice that on tooth number 9, the screw access hole is coming out straight on the incisal edge of that tooth. And obviously that's not very good aesthetically because that will show. So what we can do on the software is that we can position the abutment, angulate it by 17 degrees or 30 degrees, depending on how much you need corrected. And then if you look at the picture on the bottom right side, the screw access hole is now on the lingual to the incisal edge of that tooth. So this tells me that if I use a 17-degree multi-unit abutment, now the screw access hole will be in the correct position. So this is a really neat tool that 3Shape Implant Studio has. Now that we did all our implant planning, the next step is to design the surgical guides. For the Mucosa-supported guide, I fabricate 2 different surgical guides. One is the anchor pin guide, and one's the implant surgical guide. And I'll go over why I make 2 surgical guides for this. We like to use anchor pins to stabilize the surgical guide because we know that soft tissue, it's compressible, it's a little loose. So if we hold the surgical guide and press it, and we can actually move it by pressing on it, right? So it's not very accurate. And if we do our guided surgery this way, obviously the implants will not be positioned in the correct position. So we need to be able to stabilize the surgical guide somehow, and that's why we use these anchor pins. However, I want you to know that just because we're using anchor pins, it doesn't mean that the surgical guide is in the right position. So how do we make sure that the surgical surgical guide is in the right position. We'll go over that shortly. So when we do a dual scan protocol, we take the 2 scans and we do our implant planning. And let's say the blue implant that you see on the screen right now is our planned implant. And we design and fabricate our surgical guide. And we go to the mouth and we seat the surgical guide. And let's say the surgical guide is sitting exactly the same way that the scan appliance did. And if we place our implant, the implant will be placed in the correct position. It'll be placed exactly as we planned it. However, if the surgical guide does not seat the same way as the scan appliance did when we took the CT scan, if we place the implant, you might feel that everything went well, but the implant position is completely wrong. So what this tells us is we need to make sure that the surgical guide is seating the same way that the scan appliance did during the CT scan. So because surgical guide, when it's on soft tissue, it can move. So we definitely do not want to use our hand to seat the surgical guide and then use anchor pins to secure it, because it will not be in the correct position. So the way I position the surgical guide in the correct position is basically what I do is I create a duplicate of the scan appliance. So it's the exact replica of the scan appliance, but it will have anchor pin guides in it. So how did we seat our scan appliance inside the mouth? We use a byte registration, right? So we take that, we use the same byte registration that we used during the CT scan. We place that on the anchor pin guide, and then we get the patient to bite in CR. Because centric relation position is a repeatable position, they'll be able to go into that position and seat the surgical guide. Now at this point, because the anchor pin guide is in the correct position, now we can use anchor pin to stabilize the surgical guide. So we do our anchor pin osteotomy. And then anchor pin, we're pretty much done with the anchor pin guide at this point. And then we use our implant surgical guide. And basically what we do is we align the anchor pin guide sleeve with the anchor pin osteotomy. And then we use anchor pin to secure the surgical guide in the correct position, but also this will stabilize the surgical guide as well. Now at this point, because the surgical guide is sitting in the same exact position as the scan appliance did inside the mouth, now when we place the implant, it will be in the right position. Okay. So that's why I design and fabricate these 2 different guides. The anchor pin guide, like I said, is to position the surgical guide in the correct position using the byte registration material. And then we do the anchor pin osteotomy using this. So while patient's biting down on the byte registration, we do our anchor pin osteotomy. And then we remove the anchor pin surgical guide and place the implant surgical guide, and we align the anchor pin guide sleeve with the anchor pin osteotomy, and then position the anchor pins. Now this will place the implant surgical guide in the correct position and also stabilize it. Now really it's very easy at this point. Now we just do our implant osteotomy and place the implants. Okay, now that the guides are designed, we export it as a STL file, and then we can fabricate our surgical guide using our 3D printer. And these are the 2 guides that we fabricate. And so that's basically the workflow for Mucosa-supported guide. Now let me just share some cases with you guys. So it's an overdenture case. So for this case, in scan 1, we take the CT scan of the patient with the denture and with fiducial markers on it with byte registration. And scan 2, we just scan the denture with fiducial markers on it. And then because we see fiducial markers on both scans, we're able to superimpose these 2 images together and then do our implant planning. Now, in this case, because we're planning on doing a locator attachment, there are certain space requirements that are required. So we need at least 2 to 3 millimeters for soft tissue above the implanted platform. We need 3.5 millimeter for the locator, and then we want to have at least 2 millimeters of acrylic, just kind of all the way around that locator attachment. So we need about 7.5 to 8.5 millimeter of space. Now, if your if we don't have this space, and let's say it's going to go, that pink box that you see, if it's going to go through the border of the denture, what you might want to do is you might want to sink the implant a little bit deeper so that the restorative dentist, whoever's doing the denture, will have enough adequate prosthetic space. And of course, if it's impinging on the denture tooth, then yeah, same thing. You might want to position the implant a little bit deeper so that you don't impinge on that space. Another cool and good feature of Implant Studio is that you can check the inter-implant angles. So if we look at the posterior implants here, you'll see that they're 0 degrees. So basically that means that they're parallel. And if you look at the angle between the anterior implants and the posterior implants, you'll know that it's 11 degrees. So this is really good information to have, because even before I touch the patient to do any type of surgery and restoration, I already know that I can use a standard locator attachments for this patient because the inter-implant angle is less than 20 degrees. So I don't have to use an extended range locator, and I don't have to use a bar to correct the divergent implants. So it's a really nice tool to use when you're doing your implant planning. And of course, we design and fabricate our 2 surgical guides, and we do our surgery. So this case is actually done by a dentist that was taking our CE course at Clear Dental Education. I believe it was his second ever surgical, implant surgery that he has ever done. So if you look at, let's just go over the sequence of the surgery again together. So the first thing that you're gonna do is you're gonna put the anchor pin guide in and get the patient to bite down. One mistake that we made here is that, of course, there's no bite registration. So we should have had a bite registration in here. And then what we do is after we get the patient to bite down on the anchor pin guide, and then we do our osteotomy for the anchor pins. And one thing that you want to do before you remove the anchor pin guide is that you want to make sure that the anchor pin goes in all the way. If it doesn't go all the way, you're going to drill it again to make sure that the space, the hole is, osteotomy is big enough for the anchor pin. And then now you remove the anchor pins and then remove the anchor pin guide, and then you're going to put the implant guide on. Now, we're going to we put the implant guide on even before flapping. In this case, we're flapping the case, and the reason is because we're going to bring down the bone, because as you saw from the implant planning, we're placing the implants quite subcrestal. So we need to do some bone reduction, and of course, if we're going to do bone reduction, then we need to flap the case. So, but we still want to make sure that the implant guide can seat, and the anchor pins can go in through the anchor pin guide sleeves, and which it did. And now we're ready to flap the case. So if you look at the top right picture, that's implant surgical guide placed after flapping. So as you can see, the anchor pin still goes in. So now that implant surgical guide is placed in the correct position and is stabilized by the anchor pins. So now it's really easy. We do our osteotomy and then ultimately place our implants. And then we do if you look at the picture on the middle, on the bottom, we did place our implants and did the bone reduction and of course sutured. So if you are interested in learning more about implant surgery, restorations, and guided surgery, we do offer CE course, and I'll leave a link at the end of my presentation. So please feel free to come and look at the website and maybe even take the course. The next case that I'm going to go over is an all-on-X type case. So it's a fixed restoration. So this patient currently has a complete upper denture. She's actually happy with the aesthetics of the denture, but of course, I can see that there are a few things that I can change to improve the smile. But also, when we're doing a fixed restoration, the position of the teeth might have to change a little bit. And the reason is with dentures, we can have the teeth far out forward because there's a denture flange, but with the fixed restoration, there's no flange, right? So we cannot have the teeth too far out because there's going to be lots of undercut here and where the food will trap. So we want to bring that, we might want to bring that in. So in cases like this, I like to do another wax up and make a prototype of the final restoration and try that inside the patient's mouth. And in order for me to do that, what we need to do is, traditionally what we did is we took a face bow to mount the upper cast, and then we mount the lower cast using a bite record, and then we do our teeth setup, right? You can do using traditional wax up, or we can do it in a denture fabrication process where we use denture teeth to set the teeth. But in this case, I wanted to do this case completely digital. So I'll just go over the digital workflow. So it's actually pretty much the same thing as a conventional workflow. The first thing that we need to do is we need to take a face bow. Here we're doing the digital face bow. We're using the denture and we're superimposing it with the patient's face picture, like you see here. And then we can create a cast, a digital cast, which is a negative of that intaglio surface of the denture. So now if you look on this picture, the upper cast is mounted to the face. So we did our digital face bow. Okay. And then the next step is for us to mount the lower cast. So when we have denture, in this case, of course, we could have gotten the patient to bite down together and then scan the bite in using an intraoral scanner without any bite registration in between. However, then what happens is the denture will move if the denture occlusion is not accurate. So in this case, what I decided to do is take a bite registration first. I'm using wax. And then after the bite registration is all set, then what I do is then I scan the bite using an intraoral scanner. So now this way I'm able to correctly mount the lower cast or digital cast onto the digital articulator, right? And then, of course, to get the vertical dimension correct, we basically close the pin on the digital articulator until the teeth touch. And like I said in the beginning, I wanted to improve the patient's smile. So what I did was I did a digital smile design. Here, I think I've used the Keynote software on my MacBook Pro, but now 3Shape has smile design software, so we can use that. And then based on the digital smile design that I did, my technician did the wax up. And if you look at this wax up, especially from the side, what you're going to notice is compared to the denture, it's actually brought in quite a bit. And that's because, we can't have the teeth too far out because there's no flange on a fixed restoration. Okay. And of course, we can check the aesthetics on the software, but of course, it's always better to check it inside the patient's mouth and look at the patient's face to make sure it looks good inside the patient's mouth. So here, we're keeping the wax up, and basically we're just creating a record base or designing a record base around it. And then we can export this as a STL file, and then we can mill the prototype. And of course, this prototype is milled out of a white PMMA puck, but we added pink composite to it to mimic gingiva. So if you look at this picture, you see the pre-op that's with the patient's existing denture, the wax up, and the prototype. Okay, so it's always good to check the aesthetics and phonetics inside the patient's mouth. And although prototype is good for checking the aesthetics and phonetics, it's not a very good scan appliance because it doesn't have a buccal flange. And we need that buccal flange because we need to ultimately place anchor pins to stabilize the surgical guide. And if we use this as a scan appliance, we're not going to have that buccal flange on the surgical guide as well. So what we do is we go back to the wax up of where we created a wax up and the record base, and we just extend the record base on the buccal so that it has a flange. And then we can export this as a STL file, and then we can either mill it or 3D print the scan appliance. So that's the 3D printed scan appliance inside the mouth with fiducial markers and the bite registration in between to seat the surgical guide or the scan appliance in the correct position. Okay, and then of course we do our implant planning and make our two surgical guides, the anchor pin guide and the implant guide. And then fabricate the guides. In this case, I wanted to immediately load the implants, of course, as long as there's adequate primary stability. So the way I decided to make the temporary is by, I wanted to use the anchor pin to position the temporary in the correct position. And the way I did this is, it was a little bit of a mixture of digital and analog workflow. On the cast, what I did was I put some grooves on it, and I actually printed another surgical guide and placed it on that model. And then we indexed that using putty matrix. And then, of course, remove the putty matrix. And then what I did is I removed everything from the surgical guide except the anchor pin part, so I'll call that an anchor pin guide. And then I positioned that anchor pin guide using the putty matrix back onto the model, and then I can seat the prototype on. And when you're seating the prototype on, you just want to make sure that there's a gap between the anchor pin guide and the prototype, because if it's touching, it means that the prototype's not seating properly. And if it's not, then of course, if it's touching, then you just adjust it until it's not touching. And then basically you connect it using flowable composite. So this way, we're able to position the temporary restoration inside the mouse in an accurate way. So going into the surgery, I'll have these three things ready: the anchor pin surgical guide, the implant surgical guide, and the temporary restoration with the anchor pin guide attached to it. So let's go over the clinical steps. First thing that we do is we seat the anchor pin guide using the bite registration material. We get the patient to bite down together, and then we do our anchor pin osteotomies, remove it, place the implant surgical guide, and secure the implant surgical guide using anchor pins. Now, in this case, because the patient had adequate keratinized tissue and adequate bone volume, we decided to do this case flapless. So after the implant guide goes on, I use tissue punch to punch the tissue. And then, of course, to remove the punch tissue, I need to take the guide off and then remove the punch tissue. And that's picture 4 and 5. And then we have to put the guide back on and do our osteotomy. And then we'll place our implant through the guide so it's fully guided. But if you look, because in certain areas, the implant are being placed subcrestal, the multi-unit abutment does not seat all the way. So the bones impeding the multi-unit abutment from seating all the way. So in cases like this, because we're doing flapless, what we do is we can use a bone profile drill. And I believe a lot of implant companies do have these type of bone profile drills where it's guided. So we put the guiding cylinder, screw that into the implant, and then we use the bone profile drill to kind of profile the bone around the implant so that the multi-unit abutment can seat. And if you use this burr, the benefit is that you're not going to damage the implant platform. And then we place our multi-unit abutments, and then we position our full arch temporary using the anchor pins and place our temporary abutments and basically just connect them using flowable composite. And now it's really easy. We take off everything, unscrew everything. Now we take the temporary off, and then we basically finish everything outside the mouth. So if you have done traditional denture conversion, you know how hard that is, but this makes it a lot easier and it becomes more precise. And I think ultimately, even aesthetically, it'll look better at the end. So that's the finished immediate temporary bridge. So as you can see, it's very clean. Now, I would like you guys to check our Clear Dental Education website. So we do offer some CE courses on implants, guided implants, bone grafting, soft tissue grafting, and implant restoration. So if you do want to learn more, please come check the website out. And if you do have any questions, of course, you can ask the question at the Q&A session after Jack's presentation. But of course, if you have a question that you want to ask me personally later, then you can just email me and please follow me on my Instagram. So Jack will be up next. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Okay, Jack, you can take over.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Mark. Let me just get over here and then let me get started. So I have, you guys can see me and then I can see my PowerPoint, right? Okay, let me go over that about the Implant Studio a little more, and then actually within the Dr. Park's the presentation, we got many questions going on here. And let me just make it clear. Dr. Park used a Trias intraoral scanner from 3Shape, and then also Implant Studio software from the 3Shape. So, and then also I'm gonna show you about more detail of the Implant Studio and with the digital workflow more. So the Implant Studio was the strong point. We saw like very nice presentation from Dr. Park, and I want to say like user and patient friendly, and then also full workflow in-house is possible. So some doctor asking me about, is that possible to getting out the STL file to print? Yes, it is possible. And then also we can send to the lab for manufacturing the guide. Highly functional. In the software, I'm going to go over a very short demonstration for rear software, and you can see many tools and function is available in the Implant Studio. Cooperation with lab, that is the main point what I want to show you today, because I always just like emphasis to possibility with the 3Shape like software. I just want to say 3Shape family, something like that. From the scan, design, clinic side, left side can be cooperate each other. File can be import and export with all kind of 3Shape software. So with the next page, what I want to tell is about user friendly. So we can see the first step of like digital surgical guide, scan with intraoral scanner with the Trias, digital wax up, planning, guide design. Yes, we saw in his Dr. Park's presentation. But if you have a 3Shape system as like a family package, like a Trias intraoral scanner and also Implant Studio, what's going to happen is all the step from the scanning, digital wax up, implant planning, and design the surgical guide is going to all, you can see on top, like all the one workflow, you will see it, and you can just work with on your same PC within the same software. That's very strong point. It will make your time saving, and also the workflow going to be very smooth too. After design of the surgical guide done, of course, we can exporting out the STL file. Also, some like drilling protocol, surgical report, going to export it out too. We can print out with your 3D printer. Also, maybe you can have question, Jack, can we mill the surgical guide? Technically, it's possible, but most case 3D printing is just better work because you know, the surgical drilling could have some different angles, and the milling side could have some like limitation. So 3D printing, there's no limitation. So like we can see like big size or small size. I can see some like Kulzer 3D print here and a SprintRay printer here. So like it is very up to your choice, like small portion for surgical guide or some small models, you can go with a little small printer. But if you have like many volume for your work, you can just choose a little bigger one, okay? And then why I can say like patient friendly because of this. Probably some doctor who does have intraoral scanner already, you guys know, once your scan is done, after scan, when you show the patient always have like wow, like we can expect a wow factor with that intraoral scan. Even with the, if it was color, of course, yes, more, we can expect a good like experience with the patient. So after scan, yes, we can discuss with the patient. We can just quickly brief what happened in the patient's mouth with the like 3D view with the color. And also even for surgical guide design is the same thing too. Sometimes we have to, doctor need to explain, need to some like bone grafting or need to some like special treatment for the surgery. With this 3D view, even patient easy to understand, and then we can just easy to explain that, right? So the all kinds of like studio series from the 3Shape, like Implant Studio, Design Studio, Clear Line Studio. These things from the 3Shapes, always you can just scan first and you will have a design portion right away after scan is done. Okay, you can just adding on your Trias module, okay? And why I want to say like highly functional with the Implant Studio, I wrote down many things here, but at this moment is good timing to open the rear Implant Studio software here. Okay, this is Implant Studio I just prepared one demo file here. What I want to introduce is, as you can see, very easily like control and then all the viewer. We can see like 4 different viewer: panoramic, axial view, and then mesial, distal, and buccolingual cross-section view here. I just placed that one implant already. As you can see, from the digital wax up, implant gonna be positioned automatically. Okay. Yep. So I placed like 2 implant here, and here's a lots of buttons here, but it looks like a lot, but actually all the buttons and functions are very easy to understand and very useful too. The first thing I want to show you, which is good with the Implant Studio, is the Implant Studio is leading of the implant CAD/CAM field. The reason why I can tell you, if you see all that the implant brands logos are here, which meaning is the implant company just share their implant library into Implant Studio software. So far, 2020, November 5th, today, I just checked this morning, we have 95 implant companies library in the Implant Studio. So whatever you use, probably you can find your implant in this system, okay? And then also the second thing, for fully guided surgery, always we need to have the sleeves, right? For sleeve. So for the sleeve selection, of course, there's the original implant company's sleeves are available, and also we have third parties. The sleeves are available in the Implant Studio too. We can see the 3DBioCAD in here too. So there's like 8 different companies who offer the sleeve as like not from really implant company, but you can choose whatever you like, whatever you need. Okay. And whenever we have 2 different implant, let me say implant angles like a little different, but if the bone condition is good, and if you want to make 2 or 3 implant make 100% pattern each other, yes, we have simply click, we can make grouping each other. So system automatically group each other, and then once we switch that one implant angle change, it will change together and then keep pattern each other. Of course, once it patterns, if you need little minor adjustment, yes, we can remove the grouping too. Okay. And then I got some question just before when the Dr. Park doing on it. The question was about the engagement and angle measure. Yes, we have that. The first thing I can show you, if you see on top view, we have some like red dot, easy to rotating here. This one we can say, I can say we can control the hex or engaging position, and also for making sure you're drilling and then implant positioning on the right spot, we can control with either sleeve. This is like from the my company 3DBioCAD sleeve. We have like the buccolingual notch. So when you just place the implant, you can stop on the right position. That's first way. And the second way I can show you with the guide design too. And then also the many measurement is possible. Like, let me just introduce the distance measurement. We can just simply measure from like implant top to the crown CGL line, or the bone density measurement here too. Okay. And another one is the angle measurement here too. So sometimes we need to measure from the implant top to this where the screw channel is, and then compare with the implant direction. Sometimes we have to decide, need to go with let me say angled screw channel, titanium base, something like that. So we can just using the angle measurement here. So if the implant angle is a little bad compared with the crown design, we can just measure it, and we can just decide. We can just go over with angled screw channel, titanium base, or if it's a full arch case, you can just decide which the abutment, like multi-unit abutment, which one you have to use. You can just decide it. Okay, I'm just a little nervous, like this computer got shut down. So it will not happen again. So in the system of the planning of the Implant Studio, we have all the tools on the left side. Regarding with the view, like scan file, okay, and also crown design, sleeve, and even CBCT with a different style. Even we have like controller for CT condition too. So we have all the tool regarding with the view on the right side. We have always, when you're doing some 3Shape software of the design, left side, something for tool, right side, something for view. And then sometimes with the 3D work, maybe you guys have experience. Sometimes if we have small mistake, we can make some like find it too small, hiding somewhere. Is it too tiny here? Normally I just call it like Ant-Man here. So if you have some issue and if you lost your file in the 3Shape software, always we have some view buttons on top on the right side. Once you click, it will just come back for the front view. Okay. So after this, my session is done. After John's session is done, we're gonna go over some more questions. So I'm gonna keep open this software. So any question about the live question, I'm gonna cover with this software. Okay. And then it's just next page of the surgical guide design. We saw in Dr. Park's presentation, we just need to draw the line, system do creating the surgical guide automatically. But very nice point is this. If you see here, the first thing, orientation mark, which I just explained, system do creating orientation mark, and you will see on top of the surgical guide where knee has stopped. Okay, so you can just matching all the engaging position, and also the manufacturer's name. So here are all like major 3D printer companies' names are here, which is the printer company. They already test with the 3Shape Implant Studio, and then they set it up the good and nice offset number for your surgical guided fit onto the patient's tooth. So even you have 3Shape Implant Studio software, you don't have to worry about which printer you use because already preset the numbers gonna be here. Okay, so if I pick the SprintRay printer, it's gonna set as a proper thickness, proper gap between the teeth, and then proper gap between surgical guide and sleeve too. Okay, all right. So let me just go back my presentation quickly, and about let's talking about the lab work combined with the Implant Studio. What we can make it work is this. Once you have Trios intro scan file, you can do yourself, but let me say this is like full arch design, need to do design like digital wax or 14 teeth. You can just send it to the your lab who does use 3Shape, or other software is fine too, but 3Shape, of course, I recommend it. So in the left side, we call it dental system, which is for laboratory software, can do digital wax up and send back to you, okay? And once you get back digital wax up file, you can combine into your Implant Studio. So the original scan file and digital wax up file can be aligned with each other. And once you plan your implant, you can following the digital wax up position, okay? And next page is like opposite way. So this is same case, which I'm showing, like full arch lower, start with the digital wax up, all on forward planning. And once doctor side, clinic side, Implant Studio planning is done, can send back implant position the file from Implant Studio to the laboratory side. And the lab tech can do design like even kind of denture style or screed and bridge style, can do design and produce as like a PMMA and mill out for you. So on the right side, the photo, we can see surgical guide and PMMA conversion bridge, and also even the temp cylinder is already ready for the surgery day. So this is I did one of my rare case, so I know the length, height of the bridge. So I just prepare the titanium cylinder, even I cut for my doctor. Okay. And this is another case review, like digital surgical guide with immediate temp. It was like 4 interior case. Of course, Implant Studio, dental system, like cooperate each other, planning, and at the same time, I just make PMMA screw-in bridge, and we can see the surgery side, and on the right top, before surgery, middle one, right after surgery, and then just week after review. Okay. The last case, let me just make a little quick, is a case by Dr. John Sorensen and Dr. Uner from University of Washington Creative Process Department. They did a big job, and then we do try to make a very nice work, and start with like a little bad condition here. But what I've done from the start is this. So this is a patient's just original condition, the upper and lower, upper just almost no teeth. And my software in the dental system, laboratory software, I do digitally cut out the model with the teeth, like a bone reduction, and do digital wax up as like a denture shape. Okay, so we can see the upper lower new denture design, and also we can see I just cut out digitally on the cast. So the denture is just like sitting with that reducted surface. Okay, and of course I should make sure the length of the height, because we want to make sure bone reduction amount and the digital wax up should have the correct amount. Okay. After that, we're just creating a surgical guide, like a mucosa surgical guide style, as like a Dr. Parks, we saw it, like the anchor pin guide, and also bone reduction guide. This one made by like analog way, and rear surgical guide for surgery side, and I milled PMMA one-piece denture for immediate load. So we can see some surgery side photos here. Yeah, okay, those look very nice. And just before and after, all this work done by Implant Studio with combined with the dental system laboratory side. So my last page, what I want to tell you guys is the 3Shape Implant Studio, and also all the software and scanner, always from 3Shape and my company 3DBioCAD, we try to make something new, always coming, not stay on the same position. So for Implant Studio, bone support guide is coming soon, and also the screw-retained crown design right after surgery. Implant planning is done. We're gonna have ability to design the screw-retained crown for immediate load is possible too. And the next page, John, my big guy, he's gonna explain about the nice promotion for you guys, and then I'm happy to invite him here. Okay.
All right. Good evening, everyone. On behalf of our entire team at 3DBioCAD, again, I really like to thank you for your participation tonight. Well, just exclusively for all the attendees tonight, if you have a case that you want to try with this implant planning and surgical guide workflow with our specialists at our own dental lab, please call or email me so that I can arrange so that our specialists can do the planning together. And also, if you ended up purchasing trios with the Implant Studio, of course, we will train you very thoroughly, but at the same time, we will do the first case. We will do the planning together, and then we'll print a surgical guide for you at no charge. Okay, so now let's talk about the current trios promotion. There's a 50% off on Trios Design Studio software, which is designed for the in-house milling solution that we went over this topic in the last webinar. All these Trios 4 is a wireless scanner, which is equipped. It comes with a wired kit for your flexibility, so you can use it as a wireless or wired scanner. Also, this promotion comes with 3 years, which is 2 additional years of warranty and express replacement service. Also, $4,000 manufacturer rebate and 3DBioCAD exclusive discount. This Trios 3 wireless certified refurbished part is quite attractive package. It comes with 3Shape approved laptop and 3-year warranty on the scanner and the laptop as well. So overall, you could save about almost like a $20,000 compared to the brand new setup. For the existing Trios user who's looking to add an additional scanner or new customer who's looking to purchase 2 or more scanners, this promotion offers 2 additional years of subscription included for the additional scanner. Potential savings, combining different promotions, rebate, and discount, and whatnot, you could save up to around about $12,000, really depending upon which scanner you choose. Of course, trade up and trade in program is currently available as well. So, for any question on scanners or workflow or software, pricing and promotions, please contact us and one of our specialists will answer and will assist you in choosing the right solution. Also, please be sure check our YouTube channel and follow us on social medias for more educational content, such as last webinar that we had, and many more contents on our YouTube channel as well. That's it for me, and now here is Michelle for Q&A session. Thank you.
Thank you, John, Jack, Dr. Park. If you can just turn your video on. We have a lot of questions this evening, so I think we could just get started. One of the first questions here is, important to point out, liability is the best way to avoid a lawsuit. How can they do that when it comes to diagnostics and planning?
Oh yeah, so who gonna answer about that?
Perhaps Dr. Park?
Oh, so the question is, the best way to avoid a lawsuit if you make a diagnosis. So in our office, I do my own planning and do my own surgery. So this is not a huge issue. But I think if you are a lab and then if you're making a surgical guide and positioning the implant for another doctor, then this could be a problem. I don't know. How do you guys deal with it, Jack?
So to me, as a laboratory side who offer the service of the surgical guide, I always do make sure before I produce the surgical guide, in the software, as you know, Implant Studio, it will just keep asking about the your approval. But to me, before I click approval button, when I do digital wax up and then placement of the initial plan for my doctors, I take a screenshot and then send my doctor to getting approval. Also, if we really need to discuss more detail, I just doing like a team viewer session with my doctor to a live planning together as a laboratory tech. So always I just want to get some doctor's sign or doctor's approval, and I produce a surgical guide. That's what I'm doing as a lab tech.
Okay. What are you using for bone segmentation?
Jack, do you want to answer that question?
Yeah, bone segmentation. Actually, in the Implant Studio, we don't really have the bone segmentation and bone stacking surgical guide function yet. It is coming. I heard it's waiting for FDA approval. As you know, it's taking a long time for that. But the real case, what I review with that, bone segmentation, I did in my dental system software as a laboratory software, because in that laboratory software design, in there, I have tooth reduction function there. So I just measure from the patient original tooth inside the tip to doctor's the number of the height, what Dr. wanted reduction out, I just using that reduction tool in the dental system, not in Implant Studio. Implant Studio, we have a tooth removing tool too, but of course that removing tool is for surface scan, not CBCT scan yet. Okay, it's coming.
Okay. So for this presentation, we did Implant Studio. One of the questions was, why not use the dental module for designing the wax up?
Oh, the reason why we didn't use it is we don't actually have the denture module in our office, so that's why we didn't do it. But Jack, you'll probably use a denture module, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. Actually, that totally makes sense because in the clinic side, of course, very hard to having all kinds of module. But one thing I can tell you is that the 3Shape, like 3Shape dental system, Implant Studio, we know the two name, but in the dental system for like designing side, restorative designing side, there's like different module level, and then if I have all kind of module, the name is like complete restorative. Yes, we have it. But on Dr. Park's side, he doesn't have it, so that's why he didn't using it. But to me, when I have some like case, the doctor try to make some like all-on-4, all-on-6 as like an immediate load. I can do cover with like screw-in bridge style, also like a full denture style. Yeah, I have ability to here too. So there's no special reason to not using it. But even like on Dr. Park's side, he has a dental system premium with implant module, I think. But there's some little the function for teeth design with gingiva. So it cannot be exactly the same as a full denture module, but it's very similar work as a denture module. So that's why I think he did use it.
Okay, great. Can you use Implant Studio as a DICOM viewer without having the intraoral scanner?
Yeah, that one I can answer that too. Sometimes, yes, that's a very good point. Sometimes my doctor just took only CBCT and then sent me and then just quick review. Check, do you think it's possible or not? And just want to double check is it work or not. So if you have as like a DICOM file, we can import in the Implant Studio without surface scan. Of course, all the CBCT viewer gonna work for you. But maybe I need to tell like a little trick today. But Implant Studio will ask you to import the surface scan too, but you can just import any kind surface scan. And then you can just ignore the aligning work, and you can just use that Implant Studio as like a DICOM viewer only. Yes, it is work. Okay.
Do we have to use implant-specific guide tubes? I assume for the guide. Is a question from the implant company?
Oh, implant specific guide tube. Is it for like if it? Yeah.
I assume maybe the sleeves they mean for that.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too. The for sleeve use is very up to doctors because let me say, I'm a doctor and I have a Straumann fully guided surgical guided kit. Let me say I have it. So of course we should pick specific size of the sleeve because we should make sure my direct kit and the sleeve has to match each other and fit each other. But some doctor who does use open direct kit, just like we call it like a universal direct kit, that one, of course, sleeve size has to be follow the direct kit. So the answer is yes, we should use specific size. But some doctor using only the Implant Studio for pilot direct too. With that, we can just choose like 2.0 or 1.8. Only pilot sleeve guide is possible too. So for sleeve selection, the first time you can be a little confused, but clearly once you pick your implant brand and size, and the fully guided sleeve gonna show up on top of the implant top, and then with a proper height. And you can just switch sleeve whatever you like, but you have to make sure sleeve inner diameter has to be matching with your direct kit. Okay.
Yeah. So to add to that point, the next question was, if you use a 3DBioCAD sleeve, how do you know the sleeve height?
Yeah, this answer is the question is I just answered about that at the end of the first question. So once we pick the sleeve, implant and then original sleeve height gonna be already preset. And once you switch that, the other third-party sleeve height gonna be remaining there. So you don't really have to move it. But if you want to move it around, yes, you can move around that position. But it will have the original height automatically.
Great. There's another one here. May I know how to solve the Strawman surgical guide when the sleeve, it's a really long one, which is impinged on the soft tissue when you raise a 2 millimeter from the bone level, and then plan from the posterior teeth for the surgical guide with a drilled length of 16 millimeter and for the flapless surgery?
Okay, so I think I can answer this question. So,
Yeah.
so I can understand why you want to use a 16 millimeter long drill, because it's in the posterior. There's not enough space. So there's a couple of ways to do it. So one way of doing it is don't do it flapless, right? Raise a flap and then use a. Then you can do the surgery as long as it's not touching the bone. Now, if you absolutely want to do it flapless, of course, one thing is you can actually move the guide sleeve up, but then you might need to use a 20 millimeter drill, Strawman drill. Or what you can do is you can print out the STL file of your intraoral scan. And then you can fabricate the surgical guide in the H2 position, with the sleeve in the H2 position, and you can adjust the guide sleeve. But of course, this is not recommended, right? Because you're going to introduce more error. But as long as you're okay to accept that error, then yeah, I think you can do it flapless this way. But of course, it's not probably recommended. But I've done it too, so.
There's a question here. In Trios, does messages get emailed to doctor and lab? My lab asked the question on Trios message and I responded. A week later, the lab says they didn't see the message because they were not informed. Delayed case. Any update?
Maybe there's message yet. Is that like a question? But I think it's a question about the 3Shape communicate, right? Which is from the doctor's trios to send it to laboratory software. So as you know, the 3Shape, we have like 3Shape communicate, which is a connect between like trios software to laboratory dental system software. And oh yeah, it just got, but the messages like email the message, which meaning is when doctor sends trios file to the laboratory who does have a 3Shape software, it always like automatically send information email both like is sent and for the lab just email coming in, you have one case from doctors who. So just the question is just gone. I just try to read more here. Yeah, I just gone. But if it's keep delaying it, you can just ask to lab, or if you're a lab already, you can just call your support and ask. There is a way we can direct download the trios file from the 3Shape communicate site. So if it's not really coming into your dental system correctly on time, again, you can download it directly from the 3Shape communicate site. So if you don't know how to do it, please call your support team with your vendor, okay?
So I think this is for Dr. Park. Does your course have live surgery portion as well?
Yeah, it does have live surgery. So basically, what you would do is you would bring your own patient and you would do surgery for the implant course. So there's a live surgery for the implant course, bone grafting course, soft tissue grafting course, and then the guided surgery course. But of course, with the restorative course, there's no live surgery portion to that. If you do not have a patient, we can try to look for a patient for you, but of course, we cannot guarantee that we'll find a patient for the course.
Thank you. And just for the essence of time, is there any last things you, Dr. Park or Jack, want to share with the attendees?
Yeah, so next month in December, we're doing another webinar. So and it's on restorative. So please come join us on that webinar. Okay.
Yeah, and then also I'll be there too with Dr. Park, and then of course with my computer not will be off. So
No technical difficulties on that week.
Yeah, also, yeah, if you guys don't mind, before you guys leave, if you just mention what you guys want to see more of that, because when we set it up this webinar, we have limited time, so I try to make squeeze in the presentation. Dr. Park should be same thing. So if many people want to see, what many people want to know about that, of course, we're gonna focus on that with our presentation and webinar. So yeah, I just want to say thanks again. And might be if who does if doctors, if you guys don't know who's like 3DBioCAD, so we are like authorized reseller for all the 3Shape software and the scanner, and also we are based on the laboratory, like big laboratory we have here too. So even when you just contact to John or Jack, you can just talk anything about the CAD/CAM stuff or laboratory stuff too. We're all open about the CAD/CAM. Okay.
Yes, definitely. And to everyone who's still on the line, December 10th is our next webinar at 8 o'clock. You can scan the QR code here, or we'll be sending a recording with the next registration for the next webinar. So please join us. If you have any suggestions, you can type it in the chat, and we'll add it to our next webinar. So thank you. Thank you, Dr. Park, Jack,
Thank you.
John. Thank you so much. Have a great evening.
Yeah, you too.
We'll talk to
Okay.
you soon.
Thank you very much.
Okay,
Bye.
thank you, everyone. Okay, bye.